voiceless and what was missing.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome and thank you for being with us today. The Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. We have rather a lot of work to do today, but I don't know that that makes us any different than any other day. But in any case, prior to getting started, I'd like to give us legislators a moment just to introduce themselves. My name is Joe Rafferty. I represent Senate District number 34, which is down in York County.
Hello, I'm Kelly Murphy. I represent House District 125, which is part of Scarborough.
Good afternoon. I'm Teresa Purse. I represent Senate District 25, which is 5.5 communities in Cumberland County.
Hi, I'm James Libby. I represent Senate District 22, which is 4 towns in Cumberland County, 2 in Oxford County, and 7 in York County.
Good afternoon, Sheila Lyman, District 76, which is Livermore Falls, Jay, and most of Livermore.
Hi, Kim Hagan, District 36, Hamden and Newburgh.
Good morning. I'm Holly Sargent and, it's afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm still Holly Sargent and I represent District 147, which is the southern town of York.
Hi, I'm Jan Dodge. I represent House District 39, Belfast, Northport, and Belmont. Welcome to Education and Cultural Affairs.
Good afternoon. I'm Christina Mitchell and I represent Cumberland, Long Island, and Shebig Island.
Thank you. So to start our afternoon, we do have some language reviews with our analysts, and we will get to those. Karen, are you going first? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I do
Thank you.
appreciate it.
That's all right.
Karen Netto, Office of Policy and Legal Analysis. The first one that I'd like to do is LD 2098, and you should have a pink handout. And I think she did pull the bill files for you. This is an act to update certain higher education statutes. It was a divided report, and what I'm going over is the majority report. So the original bill requires a degree granting educational institution to pay an application fee for the initial application that reflects costs to the Department of Education for processing that application. And according to the fiscal note, the increase in the application fees is expected to generate $6,500 in other special revenue funds, revenue for the department. So that's what the fiscal note reflects. It assumes that the department will receive about 11 applications per year, consistent with the prior year, and that the average fee charged will equal the unweighted average of the 3 fee tiers charged by the department. And if you recall in the department's testimony, they did sort of lay out what they had in mind for fees, and this the fees charged will be in rulemaking. So the fiscal note, that's on the original bill, and what the amendment does, it was a friendly amendment offered by Senator Grochowski and also the sponsor of the bill, Representative Sargent. And it's on the first page of the pink handout. It simply amends the College of the Atlantic's private and special law to essentially broaden their degree granting authority. So that's a very simple amendment. And the second paragraph of the fiscal note just states that the changes to the private and special law basically, oh no, that's I'm conflating. Never mind. There's no fiscal impact to that particular thing. And the second paragraph of the fiscal note does say the original bill allows the State Board of Education to recommend an institution to the legislature for degree granting authority without additional review if certain conditions are met. And that particular provision is expected to generate minor savings for the state board, but it didn't offer a dollar amount. So that's the majority report. The vote was 8-5, and the minority report was ought not to pass. Any questions?
I am not seeing any hands or hearing anyone, so thank you.
Okay, and the second and last one that I have for you is LD 2099. It was a divided report, and I'm going over the majority report. This has to do with the aspirations program. So what the committee amendment does, the original bill proposed to repeal the provision under a student's eligibility. So this is secondary students qualifying for post-secondary courses, qualifying for paid post-secondary courses. So the original bill proposed to strike the provision about academic standing, and instead the committee amendment, the current law is that a student maintains a minimum grade point average of at least 3.0 on a 4.0 scale. What the committee amendment does, it changes that to 2.0 on a scale of 4.0, and it also sunsets that provision July 31st, 2028. And then the original bill proposed to repeal, I guess a companion piece to that is that there was an exception to this academic standing. So we're leaving, the committee amendment is leaving that in place and also putting a sunset provision on that exception. And you've actually seen the language before on the committee amendment. And then it's also sunsetting the provisions that put a cap on the credits that a student can receive. So it's $18 credit hours for a high school student and 24 credits for a CTE student. So it also sunsets the cap on July 31st, 2028. The fiscal note is attached to the committee amendment. It's again, it's a fiscal note is required, but there's no dollar amount. It does say essentially these provisions are put into statute that are currently policy of the Department of Education. So there's no new funding provided in the bill because that amount of the state subsidy is included in the department's total cost of education. The fiscal note does go on to say, however, that demand for these courses is likely to outpace available funding, even with the restrictions imposed by the bill. And the lifetime credit cap, the repeal of that on July 31st, 2028, after which the reimbursement due to eligible institutions from the department is likely to exceed available resources absent additional appropriations, statutory changes, or other arrangements. And then the second paragraph is that the bill requires the department to report back to this committee February in 2028 prior to the repeal to report on the impact of these caps. And that reporting requirement, the department says, can be absorbed within existing resources. Any questions? That may have been way more than you wanted to hear, but.
Anyone? Representative Hagan.
Thank you. What was the, you said it was a divided report. What was the vote?
So it looks like there were 10 in favor, ought to pass as amended, and 2 voted ought not to pass, and 1 member was absent.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Senator. One quick question, and you may have covered it. Did it address removing, we talked about removing the 10% cap? on the summer enrollment?
Yes,
Section
the original
14.
bill did that.
Okay,
Yeah, so
alright.
you won't see it in the amendments.
Got it.
Any other questions? There ain't none. Thank you very much. I know I'm gonna put mine behind me, so.
Wherever you'd like to start. I'm ready.
2020.
Okay, so LD 2020. This bill was tabled a few weeks ago. Sorry, if I flipped the right place here. This was an act to update Department of Education reporting requirements. You had already gotten a bill analysis from me on this, and there had been some discussions at the work session about, the bill makes numerous changes to different DOE reporting requirements throughout Title 20A. But I think most notably, at least at the work session, it seemed like there was a lot of conversation about the changes to the reporting requirements in the annual CDS report. And my understanding of the reasoning why you put this aside was to wait to receive the newest annual CDS report to take a look at that data and kind of compare it to what is being proposed in the bill. And so what I have brought you is the most recent CDS annual report and also last year's CDS annual report. The most recent one is the shorter one. The older one is the longer one that's on landscape. And sorry, I know it got stapled weird. Pushed the wrong button on the copier, my bad. So that's really all that I have to provide for you. But happy to, wherever you'd like to go.
Representative Lyman, and then followed by Representative Dodge, please. Thank you.
Representative, can you turn off your mic?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is there somebody that's going to speak to us on this? So that, I'm just getting it. So I'd like to have some maybe key points or things that we should take notice of. Is there somebody here that's going to talk to this child development report? It's possible that there may be somebody sitting behind me who may be willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Seer.
Good afternoon, Laura Seer, Department of Education. Representative Lyman, if I could just clarify, are you looking for information about the CDS report that was, I think, delivered this week? I may be mistaken, or last week. Or are you asking about the report changes proposed in this bill?
I'm asking about overall key points in regards to any of that, because in reviewing the bill and having conversation, there's a lot of child development service portions that have flags for me in regards to impact that this legislation could have. So I'm just getting this right now and, oh, sorry. My voice is a teacher voice also. So that's, if that does, it may not help, but I'm looking for, an overall.
Okay, what I can provide for you today are some of the considerations for changing the reporting requirements. I can't speak about specifics about CDS because I think everyone would be very disappointed in me if I did that. You want the experts on CDS to speak to you about CDS. You don't want my policy perspective on it. You want I am assuming you want to hear about the way the transition is happening, the benefits, the lessons learned, et cetera. And I want you to hear that from the people who know
Thank you.
best.
Thank you. And a follow-up, please.
Yes.
So yes, thank you. And I understand your position, but this bill, which has to do with the reporting requirements, what the practice of CDS is impacts those reports. So that for me, they're one and the same. I can't necessarily make a decision on one without knowing and understanding the other places. So I understand your position, but it's not necessarily going to help me in those other questions and concerns I have. But thank you for giving me information on changes.
Absolutely. And what I would do is refer you to section 5 of the bill as printed, because that, starting there, is a proposal to eliminate the section of statute that applies to what we'll call the old, in quotation marks, the old CDS report. This is the annual report that you've received. And the reason we're recommending that change is because the way that report is constructed doesn't provide the committee with the information you have been asking for about the way the transition is succeeding. And so the idea is not to get rid of the CDS report, but to better align it with the information that you want to hear, which is less about the quasi-governmental structure of CDS and more about what SAUs are doing. What do these public-private partnerships look like? What does the mixed delivery system look like? And how many students are being served by this program? What does special education look like? What does the FAPE transition look like? Those are the questions we've heard the committee ask, and we would like to update statute so that we can provide that information in the report.
And Representative Dodge and then Senator Libby, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here and attempting to answer our questions. So I'd like to refer back to section 4, please, and the concern that you may be able to help me with is where in this new reporting mechanism will not only legislators, but members of the public be able to see unmet needs, Part B, Part C, statewide, numbers, category, wait list. Where is that going to now be shared, please, with our new reporting structure?
That is information that would likely be incorporated into the transition report, because we're taking a full look at what this transition, sorry, not what, but how the transition is affecting students. So the students that have been waiting for service against the students that have already been enrolled for service, et cetera, as you've indicated.
My need is to see in the bill that those numbers are going to be clearly stated, not masked in any way under the umbrella of the transition process. That there will be a clear way for members of the public, not just legislators, to be able to have a quantity, a number of unmet needs in Part B, Part C by region. Please and thank you. So if someone can direct me about how that needs to happen, that would be great. And if this is not the appropriate time, I'll wait for the appropriate time. Thank you.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking, so the existing data point related to wait lists, which I think what you're talking about is, so this is attached to my bill analysis. I gave you the full statute, current statute about the CDS annual report. It's very long. This is on page 5 up at the top, paragraph K. beginning January 1st, 2015, the number of children who received direct services in the prior year who received all of the services in their individualized family service plan or individualized education program, and the number of children who received direct services in the prior year who received less than 90% of the services in their individualized family service plan or individualized education program. I think that's the data point that you're looking for. And so it sounds like maybe you're thinking about inserting that elsewhere so that it continues to come your way in these reports, whether it's the transition report or the annual report.
That is correct, if I'm understanding your explanation correctly. And with that explanation, does that include access in some public domain?
Well, I guess to the extent that the reports submitted to the committee are public documents and
Yes.
they're accessible to whoever would like to see them.
Representative Dodge, if I could, the transition report also would provide the number of children transitioning from Part C, which is birth to 3, to Part B, which is 3 years old and older, who are eligible for special education, as well as the number of students currently being served as listed by SAU. Does that help to clarify that?
Only slightly.
Okay.
So I'll ask this question. Where will the data point be submitted and available to people who in prior years have said, you're not meeting the target, we're going to file a suit?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay, because it would seem that that is so buried in a report of transition and Part C to Part B and all of that, that number would not be readily available, but would probably take someone too long to figure that out, is in my humble opinion. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Oh, Senator Libby, I'm sorry. And then Representative Hagan. And we'll give them a minute to do it. So, Mike.
Hi, Dr. Seer. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you today.
You too.
We're going to need to talk to the state CDS director. Will that person be available?
Not today, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that.
Why not? We're presenting CDS information.
That is true. And the CDS report changes are not something that they would be able to speak to. And that is how we approached the analysis of this bill. They are not here today because of site visits. And that is a very common.
Shouldn't they have reserved this day for our committee?
Not always. Fortunately, the Department of Education here in Maine has, I would say, a robust legislative team, myself included. And so they really rely on us because this is our content area, as CDS is their content area. So they rely on us to do the legislative portions of this work.
Well, I mean, I'm not voting on anything until I talk to the CDS director. I'll just, avoid voting, I guess. I've never done that in my legislative career, but we need to know how the employment is being affected because that is an allocation of the state of Maine. And so, and I've got nothing on that, and I've asked for it even in AFA. And so I expect that the actual kind of transition could be described by the state CDS director. And I want that transition information. And you've just said that you can't provide it, which is fine. That's good. But I do need that. And there's a number of other questions that we want to ask because it's such a big, if you think about the change in FAPE and including these 3 and 4 year olds, I mean, that's such a big move and the responsibility has led schools to hire CDS personnel who must have left your employ. And we've had no discussion about that. No one has talked at all about what will then happen to those positions. Would they be re-advertised? Or, I mean, like I said, in AFA, I mean, I would expect there to be savings there because there won't be the same kinds of needs unless, the director could say, well, we're gonna, rewrite the position's responsibilities. And so I would want to know if they're going to rewrite the position's responsibilities, then how are they going to do that and what are they going to be responsible for? So that's information that I would just expect in my responsibility for oversight. So if you, I mean, like, I can talk to our chairs, but if you could arrange that, that'd be great.
I will work with the chairs to
Yeah.
see what date we might be able to have a presentation. But I would say that the transition report would speak to those transitional items. Oh, I agree with you.
I
This
see
is
the
an
numbers.
Incredibly important topic.
Yeah, I see the
And the
numbers.
annual report, which you do have in your possession, I believe it
Mhm.
has been forwarded.
Yep.
Does talk about the total number of employees, the functions that they serve, and itemizes those employees by the service that they provide. Talks about the number of private providers, the number of contracted providers. So we are very focused on that workforce element, and that information is included in the annual report.
Yeah, I would want it explained. That's all I'm saying. It'd be really
Understood.
important to understand kind of like, like what is the strategy to get us from there to here?
In terms of this bill, LD 2020, we wanted to better align the statutory requirement for the CDS report with what the committee has asked for and include all of those elements that are separately now
Yeah.
delivered in the CDS
Yeah.
report and the transition report, and unify those two reports so that it makes better sense in the overall picture of what's going on in Maine.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Representative Hagan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I also agree with what I'm hearing, and I think in reading testimony and being a new person with CDS, some of the common themes are, the number of kids who are eligible and not receiving services should be collected, wait lists, things like that. So we'll be looking forward to that information. A couple of things that came up we had discussion about the change in the truancy. And we were concerned that change would not give us would provide enough time for reaction to the data.
I recall that, and the department took that under consideration. And if the committee still believes that a change in date would be unacceptable, we are amenable to keeping the January 15th date.
Okay, and I just have one more. Thank you. I'm looking at the blue sheet, but it's section 10 in the actual bill.
Okay.
When it's talking about it starts out with collecting data to educator preparation programs and credentialing you're adding. And then it's with respect to each educator program is being stricken.
Yes.
And then I'm wondering, is there enough data collection here for our teacher prep programs? Especially, we've had recently an article, however accurate it is or not, but I mean, it's out there that 3 of our universities are not preparing teachers to teach reading. I'm just wondering, I think it's important to be collecting enough data to make sure that our educational prep programs are working. And then how do we determine that, I guess is what I'm asking.
I 100% agree with you. And in fact, what we're proposing for that report is actually to provide more information on more areas. And so what we'd like to do is expand the topics that we're reporting on so that you all have a more full picture of the workforce development efforts underway. This would help to provide information not only on the educator prep programs, but if this committee moves forward with Chapter 115 and any changes that might be proposed this year or in future years, related to portfolios, for instance. This would incorporate that information as well. So you would have a more full understanding of how our educators are coming to the classrooms.
Thank you. So, but in pertaining to me having to vote on this bill, is that information, more info on more areas? Will that be included in? Will there be an amendment to include that to this so that we can vote on it with the information that we're looking
Look at
for?
Section 10, please.
Yes.
So there are elements in section 10, A through E, that are itemized, but that would not be an exclusive list of additional elements that we would be able to provide.
Right, then I'm looking for those additional elements
You'd like them all to be listed out in the bill?
so that I would make sure that it's assessing a teacher preparation program.
Understood. I guess I would only recommend allowing for some flexibility there so that as chapter 115 may or may not change in the future, we would be able to adapt our reporting to meet the various ways that teachers can be credentialed. So I guess my preference would be to leave it open-ended so that we could add those additional items without seeking out legislative requirement. But certainly if there are specific items that you'd have in mind, it is your committee's bill.
Thank you.
Representative Lyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can't help but respond to that open-ended. I mean, I understand that the point you're trying to make, but I also understand the unintended consequences that can come from that. And I also want to state, because this is work session, that it's really hard for me to be at a place to work this bill fully without having more specific information from the Child Development Services in regards to the data that this bill could and should allow us to have in front of us. So I really want to state that, like Senator Libby, I'm in a place where I need to hear more about Child Development Services, and I appreciate what we have in front of us, but it's not enough. Thank you.
Senator Libby.
Mr. Chairman, would you be willing to accept the motion to table?
We can set this aside right now and have a conversation in our caucuses to.
Well, that sounds like a good idea.
All right.
We'll caucus.
We will caucus, yes. All of the, this is a work session. We can caucus where we want to go to this. I'll just put it to the side for now.
Can I ask a question?
My hands.
So is
Her hand's been up.
is setting aside mean that, how's that different than tabling?
I'm just suggesting that we move on to the next
Okay.
and then make sure that we deal with this, have time
Okay.
to
And
caucus.
could I just add that
Am I,
that would mean us being able to hear from the CDS people? Can we set it aside until we get all that information we're asking for?
Let's put it aside for today, and then we have to get, you can bring those questions up in caucus, and we can we're either gonna move it or we're gonna wait until we get those reports or more information.
Thank you.
So my sense is that you're not ready to vote on it, but let's at least have a conversation to see where we align or don't align.
Thank you.
am I allowed to speak? My hand's been up quite some time.
Representative, I'm taking the questions in order. I know that you are there. You haven't had an opportunity to introduce yourself. Neither has, he's gone already. But in any case, you want to introduce yourself and then we'll hear your question.
Yeah, it's Representative Bagshaw, District 106. And I heard Dr. Sear say that the Child Development Service, I lost my volume when I was calling in to be recognized, but the Child Development Service Director was not available. because they were doing site visits. The same thing when the Commissioner of Education was supposed to come with the information I requested when we're in appropriation. She was out doing site visits. So there's no way that we should be voting on something so important without hearing from that Child Development Service Director. And I agree, we should table this, not just have a discussion about it being tabled, but there's no way we can vote on this without hearing the answers to the questions we have. Thanks.
Thank you. Is his hand up?
Nobody can introduce.
Oh, sorry. Representative Crockett,
Yeah.
want
thank
to take
you,
a
Mr.
moment to
Chair.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, I've always been here, just turned off the video for a moment. Good afternoon, everyone. Representative Ed Crockett from District 112, part of Portland, part of Falmouth.
Thank you. Any other questions right now? So everyone knows where we're headed with 2020. All right. No rape on day, so.
I'm hearing.
Yep. LD 2175. It's a big one.
2175, biggie.
Thank you.
So LD 2175 is the resolve providing for legislative review of portions of Chapter 115, which is a major substantive rule of the DOE/State Board of Education. This bill, again, was tabled a week or two ago. I don't believe there are any specific requests made of me. However, I know that there are some people behind me who may or may not be willing to answer some lingering questions that you may or may not have had.
Representative Hagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would have a few questions if that's okay. Clarification, actually.
That's why you swear in.
Thank you. So I'm looking at, to start with, I was curious about emergency teacher certificates and endorsements. And I'm reading, and please, if I'm misinterpreting, that an emergency certificate is issued for a year. And then you are able to, am I to assume that you can get up to 3? Do you reapply each year?
That's a Michael question, and I see him
Okay.
agreeing that that's correct.
So I'm wondering, it's telling me that, and am I correct in my interpretation that you can have a 4-year post-secondary degree in any area that could qualify?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, 3 years is a lot for a person who's never had teaching courses. So I'm very concerned why there would not be a course requirement for each in the between those during that time period of 3 years.
Well, First of all, my name is Tom Keller. I am Vice Chair of the State Board of Education. I report to Paulette Buno, who is a chair. I chair the Certification Higher Ed Committee, but I am far from the expert on all of this language, and there's quite a bit of language here. The expectation, the desire is that if there's a person on emergency certification, he or she will eventually become a fully certified teacher, and that there are mechanisms for him or her to reach that point, to come in and expect to just do emergency, and then be done, really is pretty rare and certainly doesn't serve the kids all that well.
Okay, I hear your, I'm personally I'm concerned about that if you're allowing a person that really doesn't have an educational background in with a certificate to be teaching our children, that there should be, there's so much more to just knowing your content. So I would feel better if there was a requirement for those people to have to at least take some classroom management, teaching the exceptional child, de-escalation skills. There's so many things that are very relevant in our today's world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, teaching is not easy, and the things you mentioned are absolutely required for that. The thing is that this is, an emergency certification, and that's why it's labeled emergency, and it isn't taken lightly by anyone. So I am happy to provide potential language on additional requirements, but that makes it even more difficult for a superintendent to find someone.
Well, I understand, and that's why, not to be disrespectful as before, but I feel, this is a lot of work, and I just feel like it's our due diligence to make sure that people are qualified. And I mean, and I hear you saying this, but last year it was presented to me that we have over 1,000, maybe there's more, of people in our schools that their background checks have not even been completed. So I really think that it's important to have this in writing as a guide, to make sure that we're getting the most qualified plus safe people in our schools. We have bills that are, we're looking at later today because we have a concern about the safety of our students. So that would be very important to me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, safety of the kids for me is paramount. And, as you point out, you've got the criminal history background check, and then you've got course requirements that every teacher in the state has to take with a diversity course and exceptionality course, and then methods courses in whatever they're teaching. It just concerns me that if we're walking a fine line here, that I want to make sure that we have highly qualified people in front of kids in every classroom. And sometimes we have to bend a little bit to say, they might not be the best steeped in pedagogy in teaching, but they at least have a degree, and they are potentially on a track to become a teacher. I mean, ideally, I don't think a superintendent really wants to staff her school with emergency teachers, and that they will find a way to move them towards more highly qualified standards. But, in this particular situation, that's how deferred emergency is made meaningful.
And I really want to believe that, but I hear testimony of things that I would expect would be happening like that a superintendent would make sure that their school is not full of emergency certified teachers. But I think that if we have it in statute, it's more of a sure thing that if we have a person has that path, if that's their path, then I don't see a problem with having them get started on learning some crucial skills that are needed. Our kids are in a unique situation now, a lot of issues with behavior, mental health issues, et cetera. And I just think it's our job to make sure that we have the best people with our kids.
Which is another reason for us to come forth with this local portfolio idea, where superintendents working with mentor teachers within their district can look at satisfying certification requirements through service, in essence.
Yes, but I don't see it referred as an option for the emergency certificate. There's nothing, no mention of the portfolio process.
I see your hands, folks.
Okay.
I do. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Sure.
I have Representative Dodge will be followed by Representative Sergeant and Representative Lyman. And
Thank you.
you have a request for,
Yes, please.
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is it possible to ask Mr. Perry a couple of targeted questions?
I'd like
that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, thank you for being here. Do you want to?
Sure. Hello, I'm Michael Perry. I'm the Director of Higher Education and Educator Support Services at the department, and one of the teams I supervise is the certification team.
Thank you very much. So my question is, following along with Representative Hagan, can you speak for just a moment or two, or maybe I'm directing you in the wrong direction, in which case take a left turn and left turn, Clyde, and away we go. But I'm assuming, and I know how dangerous that is, that a teacher who is in an emergency certification situation is saying, when can I take my exceptionality course, and where and how, and where am I going to get at least a very basic methods course in this, because I'm going to be in the classroom in 2 months, and the same with a basic management class. Can you talk about the order in which those might be recommended to happen, or whatever direction I should have asked you
No,
about,
sure.
please?
It's a good question. And the reading of the base requirements for emergency teacher certification are not wrong, but let me give you some more detail about how it actually works in practice, which is we do not have a show me your bachelor's and apply for emergency teacher, here you go system. Someone who wishes to teach and is thinking maybe they'll even land on an emergency teaching certification needs to apply for full teacher certification. They receive a letter from the department that has a bulleted list of everywhere they would need to, all the different courses and requirements they would need to fulfill to qualify for professional teaching certification. So from the beginning, they know what their target should be. There are two other pieces I'd like to highlight for the emergency teacher. Three. One is that at the moment that they say, I don't have these courses, they'd like to hire me to teach English or what have you. The certification team, by our own internal policy, has a conversation with the person at that moment, even if we are about to issue out the emergency teaching certification, which is to explain, please take careful look at this letter. When you reach the end of your 3 emergency teaching certs, we don't have another
Option.
4th year option for you. And we have found a remarkable difference in eventual outcomes for folks who have a bachelor's and, I could be a teacher, and end up on an emergency teaching cert and are overwhelmed sometimes and don't have a plan going in about how they're going to land at the end of those 3 years. We see much better outcomes for folks that have really clear-eyed conversations with us about where they are in their professional development and make a plan for themselves and know where they're going to get the online courses on the side of teaching. It's still hard to go into the classroom for the first time and take those courses, but we have seen success with folks that have those plans. A second piece I would offer is that when we look at Rule Chapter 115, and when we think as policymakers, I include myself in this, it is easy for us to imagine that the least qualified person we could imagine qualifying for this will get the certificate and will immediately be in the classroom. When we do that, we forget the leaders at the local school level who want good teachers for their classrooms, who are not curling their pantomime 30s villain mustaches and waiting to put an unqualified person with a bachelor's and no qualifications in the classroom without any support. We have found really strong partnerships with our superintendents to get to staffing solutions, but also with a mind to correct professional development. And for some superintendents we have these conversations with, they would rather not have someone on an emergency teaching certificate in the classroom, but they'd rather have someone with an emergency teaching certificate and a plan than a long-term sub, which would be their other recourse. And then the third thing I'll say is that as a new teacher in the school, there are requirements for them to be mentored. And so that is another layer of support that these teachers have. It's not an ideal situation. We don't try we are not actively driving people to the emergency teaching certificate. It is a tool that is useful in certain circumstances, and it is often better than having a patchwork of substitute teachers instead.
A quick follow-up.
Yes.
So, is there a standard for local support systems to have X number of people and X number of meetings? I'm
Yes.
reaching back. So will that information may also help alleviate some concerns?
Yeah, sure. PEPG, the rules around that. And yeah, I do not remember the rule number off the top of my head, but it's out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sargent, followed by Representative Lyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So happy to have you here, Ms. Perry, and for all of your work. So my question about sort of the emergency certification folk that have been, we've had to bring into schools is I'm very high on the new portfolio planning process and putting sort of the development of individualized plans into the hands of the superintendents and administrators, et cetera, that are going to have to run their schools. And what I was just thinking is, wouldn't an emergency certified teacher have access, or shouldn't they have access actually to the same kinds of discussions around sort of the portfolio discussions in terms of hiring someone and saying, this is your plan that you're going to have to follow in order to become totally certified or whatever? Shouldn't they sort of be swept in together, or am I missing something?
You're certainly right that the same person who now their best recourse might be an emergency teaching certification in an informal plan, with the proposed portfolio process, they would potentially be entering this new position with a set portfolio and lists of goals that their school leaders are following with them, and they would be issued a 3-year conditional on the agreement that they'd be working on the portfolio throughout those 3 years. So in some ways, it formalizes the sort of informal reality of being an emergency teaching certified teacher.
Follow up, go ahead.
So let me just also play this out a little in my own mind. So, as you were saying, someone applies to be a teacher. They get a letter that says, well, you've got to do all of these things to actually become fully certified. But basically there is an opportunity maybe for you to be emergency certified or whatever. So I'm going to go to Gorham and I'm applying for this position. Now, what you're sort of saying, I think, is that in many cases, in the conversation with that person being hired, they could possibly be brought into this portfolio process, or which would sort of put them on this plan that we're all excited about. Or I suppose they could say, well, no, I don't really want to be a part of that plan. I'm just going to take my emergency for a year. And that would be therefore the superintendent or whoever's principal's decision. Are we going to hire this person, for the first year or not? I guess what I'm feeling is, as this portfolio process emerges and evolves, that more and more of those folks that currently have different kinds of preparation and have to be in the portfolio process, that the number of those that are sort of in this emergency thing is going to decline, because, everyone would want to be on this sort of more official path.
Yeah, there is that possibility, and that was well said. And I think I'd also just remind folks that when we look at the sub-professional certification levels, when we look at any certification rule, it is easy to imagine the brand new teacher fitting into those areas. there is a significant portion of our conditionally certified and emergency certified teachers that are actually, you know, they were an elementary school teacher, they're moving to a middle level. They were a physical science teacher, they're moving to life science. And so to get into the classroom, they have some sort of temporary license, and they're going to wrap up what they need to anyway. So that's also another population that could be served by the portfolio, or right now is being served by these temporary credentials. Yeah.
Representative Lyman, please, and followed by Representative Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so many questions, but the first one, which goes back to, on the emergency certification, is there a time limit for that certification before, do they have so much time in order to achieve the step beyond an emergency certification?
Yeah, sure. So an emergency credential, when it's issued out, is good for 1 year. And you do reapply at the end of that year. And you can do that up to 3 times. So assuming they're putting in their applications, they could be on an emergency track for up to 3 years. By then, they'd have to have done whatever they need to do to at least get to the conditional 3-year. And then they could continue to build up to professional from there.
So can you share what the justification would be for allowing 3 years on an emergency certificate?
I don't think that, well, now I'm just playing imagine what the policymakers were thinking. But if I were playing that game, I wouldn't think that 3 years was put in to give a long runway. I think it was put in to put a cap so that someone couldn't be on an infinite loop of emergencies. I would think that was really the goal there.
Okay, and I'm kind of curious, a few times here, and maybe more, but it talks about completing 6 semester hours of approved study of 90 hours of an in-service training that is relevant to the work. And then in B, it says, again, 6 semester hours of approved study or 90 hours of in-service training that is relevant to the work. Can you give me some examples of what those could be that are relevant to the work? That just seems so vague to me and gives me a potential flag.
Oh yeah, the most common accrual of those 90 hours would be trainings provided by your local school that you're serving in. If I'm thinking of the right area, I'm thinking, are you looking at renewal requirements?
It's under, yeah, but it says provide presentation of the successful completion of 6 semester hours of approved study or 90 hours of in-service training. I don't get that as a workshop kind of situation. That, to me, that's experiential learning. And I'm just curious to what are some examples that would be relevant to the work? Do you understand why
yeah,
this seems vague to me?
Could you help me with the section so that I could take a look and make sure?
It's page 11, D, renewal, 1,
Yep.
A and B.
Yep. Thank you. This is the requirement over the course of 5 years for someone who is professionally certified to have what we call their renewal hours. They're expected to take trainings that help them stay on top
Yeah.
of the profession. And most schools run in-service trainings on classroom management, on all manner of things. Those decisions about what counts for those 90 hours, those are actually done at the local school level by the certification committees of the local school district. And so the Department of Education is only looking at those 90 hours. In the rare circumstances, it's not unheard of, but occasionally someone isn't actively serving in a school, but they are taking educational trainings, going to conferences, staying on top of the profession because they want to keep their certification valid. We would look at the hours in that case, but the vast majority of folks serving in schools, it's their local committee that makes the determination of what counts for those hours.
So my initial feeling
Yeah.
is that since this is chapter 115 and this is law,
Yeah.
that it should be specific to, or somehow more explicit language that suggests exactly what you're saying. And then I'm curious, they took out design to improve the performance. Why would that be removed? Because that's exactly what we do as teachers all the time with our professional development is to improve our performance. I'm curious why that was scratched out.
Well, that's one I have to look to Tom like he was looking to me earlier. I'm not sure what the state board exactly. I don't want to speak for them when they put this edit in place.
Yeah, I think the intent of, if you open your hymnal, I think the intent, the intent was that
Okay.
that it, it's very broad language to say improve the performance of students. So there are some trainings
No,
that
this is of the teacher.
of the teacher, sorry. I mean, there are some trainings that aren't necessarily directly toward academic improvement, but are more for understanding the psychology of a middle school student, that you might not say that's going to improve their math score, but it will improve the teaching as the teacher has a better understanding of what those kids are going through.
And just to follow up, I would just politely, push back a little that this is actually discussing the performance level of a teacher, not academic performance. Certainly academic understanding of the teaching profession and how you apply that in your practice. But to me, it's more than appropriate to stay within there. And I will stop there, but there are many places in this document where I really think we need to have some discussion about some potential word change. This is big. It has a huge impact, or it certainly should, on our profession. So thank you.
It is very big. And I will remind you that, we've been working on this about 18 months with all kinds of educators and all kinds of educator groups. And, this is where we are right now. And we would love to be able to say, let's start implementing this. But, as you just saw, I cannot answer every question that's in here, but I certainly heard from lots of people.
Any other questions? Representative Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Department of Ed, if that's okay. So I'm perseverating a little bit on this emergency certificate. So my understanding is that a person does not have to be in the teaching profession to get an emergency certificate.
Correct.
So I just want to clarify, because I've asked a couple of times that we're voting on the portfolio process as well. And I was told, and am I misinterpreting, that the portfolio process is for a established teacher that has had a teaching certificate or currently has a certificate. So I don't know how the portfolio process would apply to an emergency certificate. Am I misinterpreting something?
I did hear that in the previous work session. The second, that was one use case that was presented during the last work session. The other use case was a career changer, someone who has learning in the field but hasn't taught, and the school district would be helping them learn the classroom management, those other sort of methods-based skills or classroom study that they would need to do.
So they could start teaching without any of those classes, because they're going to start a portfolio that tells them what they need to be taking versus what the requirement is to be endorsed as a teacher.
The improvement in this version of 115 for that concern is that versus the current reality where someone who is doing a career change and is on an emergency teaching certificate, they are informally building their plan to learn the skills of the profession with the certification team or with their local school leaders. The portfolio would put them on a formal track for that.
Okay, well, then I guess I would feel better if that was explicitly spelled out in here, that would be happening within those 3 years, that they are actually taking courses that are needed, that are similar to what you need to take to be endorsed as a teacher. Because as I already stated, not to keep repeating myself, but our kids are in a whole different world these days. And for a person to be in there for 3 years without having some of the skill acquisition and a clear understanding of the needs of the grade level that they're teaching, I have an issue with that.
Yeah. And so to root it how it's stated right now, I totally hear that. The portfolio, as it's stated in 115 right now, would be designed to address all of the requirements in part 2 for each teaching area. And in part 2, when they talk about each teaching area, those methods courses are in there. And so because of that, the portfolio would be required to address the content either directly through taking methods courses or for some equivalent of learning those classroom methods. So that's the math of it right now. I take your point that the portfolio section, if you just looked at it right now, doesn't spell that out. What it does do is it pins it to the current requirements of part 2, which do have those methods requirements.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm looking at the actual emergency teacher certificate and endorsement, and none of that.
Oh,
is in
yes.
there.
No, this is the portfolios. This is
Right.
completely
So
separate from
I guess
emergency
what I'm saying
teaching.
is I would be happy to have it included in this part. It would make me feel very good. Thank you.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you. And thank you for answering the questions. And this is obviously enormous and trying to weed through it all, but I have a question about long-term subs.
Yeah.
Are they required to be certified teachers?
Yes.
Okay. And how long can they be in place if it's outside their content area? How long can they be in place? Or is that a local decision? So I'm thinking like you're a certified teacher of English, but you're covering health as a long-term sub. You're a certified teacher, but not in that area. What is the protocol there?
The way it would work from the department's perspective is that it would be understood for that year of reporting. And so then it would be a fresh decision by the local school district the next year.
So they're not classified as emergency certifications because they're certified and they're subs?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, I lost my. Yeah.
What we got next?
1892. I do is fine.
So LD 1892, an act to establish procedures for school construction projects. This bill was carried over from the first session. There have been a couple of work sessions on it. This session, you heard recently yesterday from the chair of the Governor's Commission on School Construction. There had been an amendment that was distributed by the sponsor of the bill. And that is where we are, I think, currently.
Representative Brennan, do you have a question or something you would like to add?
Well,
Turn on your microphone, please.
I have an amendment to my amendment that I wanted to share with the committee.
Proceed.
Thank you.
Oh, he's going to the desk.
You know, I keep it, but what did I do with the new amendment? What did we do?
Just put on our desk, I guess.
And it's got the HVAC, but it still has a problem.
Take, if you don't mind.
Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Brennan. I represent District 115, which is part of Portland. And fortunately, I had the opportunity last month to present an amendment to LD 1892. And I'm just going to go through that very, very quickly just to refresh people's memory. And then I have one part that I've added to it, but I'm open to a discussion about it. The very first part of the amendment, as I told you, when we look at the total bill of 1892, I was basically asking you to disregard 3/4 of what was in the bill because it had to do with funding and funding sources and gambling and cigarettes and everything else. So that is off the table at this point. So instead, the amendment, the first part, revolving loan fund and renovation, there are 3 parts to this proposal. The first part is to increase the eligibility for school districts for this program. Currently, you can apply for $2 million, and I'm increasing that to $8 million. And I think that's consistent with a recommendation from the governor's task force as well. Secondly, the money for the program, I'm recommending $50 million a year would go into that program, and it would come from the Cascade portion of the state budget. And that, again, would be something the Appropriations Committee would work to put together exactly where that $50 million might come from. I'm willing to talk a little bit more about the Cascade, but let me work through the rest of it before we get back to that. And this program, we still would maintain the same priority areas for funding. And the expectation, the hope would be that we would keep buildings, we'd be able to do maintenance and renovation in a way to keep them out of the major capital improvement program. Sometimes, many times, we have buildings that don't get appropriate maintenance, ongoing maintenance, and they get to a point, deteriorate to a point where they qualify for the major school construction. So the attempt is to keep them out of that. Secondly, major school construction program. These recommendations for increasing the debt limit service is consistent with the Commissioner of Education's recommendations. And in fact, her recommendations are more aggressive than I originally had in the bill. Currently, we have $150 million in debt service. This would increase debt service by 2028 to $188 million, then to $194 million, then to $200 million, and then to $206 million. And in my original bill, I went to 175 and then to 200 million. So the commissioner is actually, as I said, more aggressive and increasing the debt limit service. There's also, and I don't want to get too bogged down on this, but I have talked to the department. They say this is possible. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to take the debt limit service and have a separate line item in the Department of Education, and that when we calculate 55% for school funding, we will continue to have 55% for operation, administration, and for school funding, and that will not be affected by an increase in debt limit service. And I can explain that more if people want to at some point, but the idea is that we want to increase the debt limit, but we also want to make sure that we have 55% funding for the cost of education. The next part, and again, this is a recommendation of the governor's task force, is for the Department of Education and State Board of Education to develop rules and regulations to insert a cost-sharing formula into school construction. Now, we are currently one of only 5 states in the country that pays 100% the cost of school construction. And there seems to be a lot of agreement that we should go to a cost-sharing model. What percentage that might be in the original bill that I had 75%, 25%. But I think we should ask DOE and the state board to come up with either a sliding scale or some other metric that would give us a cost-sharing formula. It might be 50-50 for some places. It might be 90-10 in other places. So we want them to come back with rules and regulations on that going forward. The second part, there's some people that are nervous across the state now as they move forward with their school construction project, assuming they will get 100% funding. We don't want to disrupt those school districts that are currently in the pipeline for funding. So one of the things that the state board and DOE will have to do is look at when would be the appropriate time to implement a cost sharing approach without negatively affecting those school districts that are currently under consideration. The last, not the last, the fourth proposal is what we call an accelerator program. They have this in Massachusetts and I guess a couple of other states. Senator Rafferty pointed this out at one point, but we have a number of school districts across the state of Maine, and actually Val Libby, the chair of the governor's task force, mentioned this as well. We have school districts across the state of Maine that have mold, and they have roofs that leak, and they have heating and cooling systems that are antiquated and don't work. So rather than have to wait for the revolving loan fund or major school construction, the accelerator program would get money out immediately to school districts across the state of Maine that have mold, that have roofs that leak, and that have heating systems that are inadequate or antiquated. And this would be a new program. This is not something the state does now. And this is a way for us to get more school construction, renovation, repair money out to a lot more schools across the state of Maine than the current two programs we have. That program would be funded from 50% of lapsed balances in GPA. And each year in the GPA account, we have lapsed balances that go anywhere from $10 million to $40 million. And that would take 50% of that. And again, I think there could be a discussion about whether it should be 25%, 50%. I'm not wedded to the percentage, absolutely. But the ability for us to be able to be more responsive almost immediately to school districts, I think would be a huge step forward for the state of Maine. The last item, and this is the new part of the amendment that I did not share with you last time. Obviously, we just on Tuesday had a report from Val Landry and from the governor's task force on school construction. And I thought it was important to find some way forward. I'm assuming that this committee in the next day and a half, we're not going to be able to go through all the recommendations and all the report and come up with some type of legislative response that would be meaningful. So what I tried to do is think about how to put together a working group and who might be on the working group. And not that I expect everybody to remember this, but if you looked at the report on page 33, 34, and 35, there's section 5, which is called Table of Objectives, Strategies, and Actions. I thought that those 3 pages did a pretty good job of summarizing the report and also summarizing those issues that need further discussion, further proposals, more metrics, more information to come back to the legislature and to come back to the next governor, the next administration on how to move forward with school construction. And I mentioned a number of people that I thought should be on the working group. And there's a report that back date of November 2026. That might be a little bit too quick, and we could extend that out to next year if necessary. So again, I'm not wedded to number 5 in terms of what's drafted and what's before you now. I just thought it would be necessary for us to figure out a vehicle for how this work can move forward. So I'll stop at this point, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that I'm able to answer.
The whole right side of the table. would like to ask a
I'm
question.
impressed at how quickly your hands went up.
It was simultaneous, I think, so. Your mic's not on.
Oh, hang on, hang on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so few questions, but I'll ask. This working group, is there, and I saw it described in here, and is that sort of what you're going with for the members of the working group? What's within this document?
It's a mix, Senator Lemon, it's a mixture of those people who are currently on the commission and then a couple more.
Okay, is there a cost related to that group and the work that they will do?
Well, what I've learned, to be quite frank with you, when we call it a working group, it's got a better chance of moving forward without there being a fiscal note on it than if I make it a legislative study that would have to be funded, or if I put it together in a way that's going to require the Department of Education to hire staff. So my hope would be that if there is a fiscal note, it'd be minimal to non-existent.
Okay, so I was going to say, if the intent is non-existent, then that's great. But if there's going to be a fiscal note, I'd really like.
I look forward to a vigorous discussion with the department to try to make sure we don't have a fiscal note.
Okay, I'll let Representative Hagan.
Representative Hagan and Representative Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you. I mean, I have to talk money. And I know we need to do something now. And I think Paul, probably these things they look excellent, but I don't see how it will happen at this point based on what I'm seeing for expenditures in our supplemental budget and how a lot of this money that I believe you're talking, where the funds that it will come from are already earmarked for things. So how do we, rather than this sitting and waiting to see if it gets funded, what can we do now to actually get some of these schools some help?
Well, Representative Hagan, that's a good and persistent idea, but everything that's offered in the amendment is not part of the current supplemental budget and is not current of the current funding in this biennium. Everything is moved to the next biennium. It would be the responsibility of the next governor, the next legislature, to determine the priority in terms of funding. However, we can right now change the makeup of the cascade in order to have the money available, the $50 million available for that program. And the debt limit service has not been increased since 2021, 2022. That would be included in the cost of education and the calculation going forward in the next biennium. So I don't want to be glib, and I don't want to overlook the fact that this is going to cost something, but it's not going to cost something in this fiscal year. And the way the funding is structured, it would affect the next budget, the next biennium, and be the decision again for the governor and the legislature to decide if they want to be this aggressive with debt limit service and whether or not they would want to maintain the 50 million in the cascade. As I've mentioned, historically, and I'm talking years and years and years, there's almost always been a lapse amount of money that lapses into the account for GPA. That account is a non-lapsing account, meaning it does not go back into the general fund. It stays in that account. And we've had, again, 3-4 years ago, there was $40 million in that account. If you recall, this year in the budget, in the supplemental budget, there's 16 million that's being funded out of this account for pre-school programs in the state. So CDS and private preschool programs, they're anticipating at least 16 million coming out of that account this year. So I appreciate your concern about the budget and the funding, but I really truly believe this is the quickest and most efficient way for us to put more money into school construction and to allow more schools access to that funds almost immediately in legislative time.
Okay, so that was my next question. So I need to understand, and I appreciate your patience with me because you're more of the money person, obviously, than me. So I'm voting. If I vote to say yes, what am I actually saying?
You're saying that that in the next biennium, my hope and my expectation is that this year in the supplemental, we are going to be able to look at an appropriation to revolving loan and renovation fund this year. Next year, the next biennium budget would include the increases in debt limit service. And then the cost sharing, again, that'd be something that'll come back in another year. The accelerated program, again, I would see that as another year in the budgeting process. So what you'd be voting on, I would hope, more immediately would be the revolving loan and renovation program. And subsequent years would pick up the other two programs.
So I'm committing, my yes vote is committing to the next administration to make sure that
Right.
these things are happening.
That's correct.
Okay, I have one more and then I'll be quiet. So I guess for this year, because we talked about this last time, you're saying for the revolving loan or renovation program, the $50 million, when it has this cascade plan for 2026 from your appropriations been
That's
changed.
correct.
Have you spoken with
That's
them
right.
about
Yep.
where it fits in here now?
That's correct. And you and I have spoken about that. And we just received a presentation from the head of OPLA on cascades. All of that is statutory. There's no constitutional requirements. And the legislature has authority at any time to readjust those cascade and readjust where that money goes to. So for example, last year, after we closed the budget, there was $150 million of lapsed balances into the general fund. And the amendment that you're holding, Representative Hagan, then said out of that $150 million, X amount had to go to the rainy day fund. X amount had to go to transportation. And I think X amount goes into the unfunded liability, the third. But I'll read the amendment and you can tell me. So those are statutory requirements. And at any point, the legislature can change those statutory requirements and say, rather than that money going into the rainy day fund, $50 million can go into the revolving loan and renovation fund. And then, again, I don't want to get into a whole, but there are also other lapsed balanced accounts and cascades within the budget that we could fund the revolving loan and renovation program out of. So my hope would be that we would get language in the supplemental budget this year that would allow for that $40 million to be available next year.
Thank you for that great explanation.
Representative Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you, Representative Brennan, as always. So what you just addressed something that I was concerned with, which was the timing of, and I guess the process for changing the statutory language so that we could earmark going forward a chunk of the lapsed balances of the Cascade Fund. You're saying that will happen, that could happen as the supplemental budget is being completed and then processed. Therefore, that would be reflected depending on how this fiscal year ends, correct?
Correct. So it could be more immediate, or the legislature could say, we're going to kick it to 2025 or the next biennium or whatever. But the key thing is having the language in that says when these lapse out balances are available, here's where they're going to go.
Right. And your sense on that is that it's better to have a dollar figure, i.e. 50 million, rather than a percentage of, I mean, I'll just throw that out because to me, I'm thinking, well, maybe it should be more if it's a very large lapse balance.
Well, that is a good thought. And I don't, again, I can't give you a clear rationale as a dollar amount versus a percentage. But just for example, Senator Peirce is not here. She has a bill in that would take the interest earned from the rainy day fund, which is about $40 million a year. And a percentage of that would then go to Lands for Maine's Future, would go to these, and she did more of a percentage than she did a dollar amount.
Got it.
So but the, if we looked at a lapse balance of $150 million and the lapse balance is actually larger than that.
Yeah.
I like a dollar amount as opposed to a percentage, but we could also put a dollar amount and then say, depending on the availability
Right.
of.
That this could, that the legislature could understanding the intent of the language, it could be changed, because I mean, the truth is we could have 50 million as the total.
Right.
And so we wouldn't be getting 50 million.
Right.
Second question. I have 3 questions.
Follow-up number 2.
So, in the cost sharing,
Yep.
again, and that this would be one of the things that I'm wondering is that would there be, I would hope that there would be an absolute minimum. So in other words, whether that's 5% that a community has to put in to get 95 from the state or whatever, that I really think that particularly in communities where we get 0 all the time, that we would like to, make certain that frankly, everybody would have at least a minimum stake in the game when they're getting large amounts of money. So I'm assuming as those rules were developed, we'd have a chance to have input into that.
Absolutely. And we could ask Ms. Roig in drafting this to say in the rulemaking process, consider a minimum contribution. We wouldn't put it in, but that they would have to consider a minimum contribution in the rulemaking process.
Okay,
And,
good.
and I think you understand, I mean, if we went to Representative Murphy's community and said, we'll do a 50-50, they'd be pretty happy. But then we have situation, the school in Oxford County, you'd probably have to do a 90-10 or 95-5 in order to make that work. And I think the idea behind this is to get away from a winners and a lottery approach to school construction and try to spread the money around in a way that benefits more communities. But you're absolutely right. There should be a fiscal capacity component in that decision.
So I'm also interested in the accelerator program, where I would say that I'd be interested in thinking creatively about what the income eligible sort of for getting that kind of immediate and kinds of money, particularly for HVAC, particularly for mold rehabilitation, whatever. And I would hope that there would be consideration there to open it further to those of us who, may not have a great deal of income eligibility for other funds, but maybe have this kind of immediate need that would really be served to be able to have these rapid funds.
And Representative Sargent, not to pander for your vote, but I would agree with you that the chances of your district obtaining state money for some type of renovation repair is in that accelerator program. And so I think the rules and regulations should be more flexible. The ones that we have in revolving loan and renovation really focus on immediate health and safety concerns. You got mold in the school, you got something that's crumbling. And I think we could have more flexibility with the accelerated program on who's eligible and how we can respond. And again, the idea is to try to spread more money around the state for renovation and repair rather than having them in programs that only a limited number of communities get access to. So I would be in favor of looking at rules and regulations, not that I'm going to be here to do that, but I would be to allow a broader array of communities to qualify than possibly for the renovation and revolving loan fund.
Representative Lyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm kind of interested in, I heard you say, and it seems like 50 million is going out a lot, but I felt like you said 188 million the first year and then up to 206 million. I forgot what year. So, and that this process was going to be for the next legislation to continue into the biennium. So I'm wondering, what are the potential consequences? That's a significant, I mean, money I can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
So what are the potential consequences to that ending up in the next biennium? What's going to get hurt? I mean, I absolutely believe in it. Listening to the testimony on the need for construction in our schools,
Yeah.
especially, as you said, the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance, so we don't have the big complete school builds.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm hearing that we're pushing that into the next one. And I've got to think, with that big of numbers, what are the consequences of that going to be to the overall budget?
Well, it is a big number. You're right. You should be concerned about that. And hopefully it'll have big consequence in terms of our ability to address what is a very large problem. But, you know, I can't give you the absolute math at this point, but right now we have $150 million. We're going to kick it up to 188 if this goes forward, and then that gets calculated into the cost of the budget in the next biennium. And even staying at 55% is a big number. This year it's going to cost us $48 million to stay at 55%. For school funding. So, Representative Lyman, I can't give you any assurance at this point that we're not talking about a significant infusion of new money into school construction. Then what you're going to have to decide is it worth it? Or is there another mechanism? I mean, other states do dedicate a certain amount of money to school construction. They have local option tax. They have other ways of funding school construction and have revenue sources to do that.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to tell you this isn't going to cost money. I'm not going to tell you it's not a big number. And it's going to be something the legislature and the future governor is going to have to wrestle with next year.
I'm just really interested in, you know,
But-
naming some of what I mean, you have to think about that.
Well-
There could be unintended consequences. And
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
if you could give me, so we know we have immediate needs right now.
Yep.
And there's money available.
Yep.
What process or protocols are going on so those immediate needs are being addressed?
First, let me ask you, where do you think there's money available?
Well, I'm assuming I'd have to get the overall, I can't give you numbers. Economist here, help me out. But you know what I'm.
your own.
Wow. That's throwing us out of the raft.
Well,
I think you know
Representative
what I'm
Lyman,
saying. We
Do you
heard,
know of an economist that's ever been accurate in their prediction of anything?
wow, you guys you are helpful. Yeah.
I'm not looking for
Okay.
a brawl here.
I was just trying
Let's keep to the bill.
Well, I am.
You are.
Oh, okay, thank you. I got tossed out of the raft.
Okay, so Representative Lyman, your question, where, I mean, we know what's available in terms of the rainy day fund. We know what's available that's being proposed in the supplemental budget. We don't know exactly how much there will be available in lapse balances by the end of this year and going forward. And I appreciate your question of immediacy. There are school districts out there right now, they need the roof repaired, they need heating systems to be fixed, they need classrooms to be expanded. And the best hope I can give at this point is that next year at this time, the accelerator program will have some life to it, and that there will be $50 million available for renovation and repair. And then the debt limit service will significantly expand the number of schools that will be able, that list of 30, 40, 50, 60 schools that did apply. This last time, I think it was 70 schools that applied, that rather than getting stuck at 9 or 10, we're going to get into 20, 25, 30 during the cycle of major projects.
So am I hearing you say that right now, for moving into the close of the educational part of the school year, there's not money available for them to take on for the spring and summer
The-
to address immediate needs?
Not through the increase of this debt limit service or the accelerate, neither one of those are going to be in play. And then I'd have to check, but last time I checked, I don't think there was much money available in the renovation and repair program. But if you want to do something more immediate, I'd be more than happy to talk to you and see if there's money that we can make available. Again, I think that we'd have to concentrate on the renovation and repair program and then some type of accelerated program if you want to get money out very quickly to school districts that have immediate needs.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have Representative Hagan and Representative Bagshaw.
Thank you. I have lots of ideas of where you could get some money, but I don't think the majority party would like it. So my question is.
Well, that's part of being in the legislature. We all
Yes.
have ideas.
Yes.
It's trying to get
But
180
my ideas are really good.
people to agree.
So I have a question because we're looking at number one, revolving loan and
Yep.
renovation. If you were able to wrangle that money to, I mean, we need to get started in helping these schools. So my question is, does this provide enough language to incorporate like the recommendations from MEPRI and the Governor's Commission about how we get the most for our money? To put some
The short
parameters?
answer is no.
Okay.
It does.
So that's a problem.
But the solution is sitting next to me. And I am hopeful, if the committee votes for this amendment, that we'll be able to redraft the bill and incorporate, all the requirements of the amendment in a bill and have a bill, for this committee to vote on and for the legislature to pass. And then I would assume that it'll go to the appropriations table and, have consideration there.
Not the answer I was looking for, but thank you.
But my expectation is that we as a committee, given what we know to be the need, that this will have support in both the House and the Senate. And at this point, there seems to be some support from the governor's office. And then the question is what happens on the appropriations table?
We know it's a great need.
Yeah.
Representative Bagshaw.
Hi, thank you. Representative Brennan, I love how you always come in and ask for huge amounts of money at the last minute, but I'm just concerned about tapping the next budget after we've just doubled our budget under the current administration. This is very important legislation, I agree. Something needs to happen, but do you think that maybe we could reduce some spending in some other areas and appropriate this year's money for this item and not tap the next year's budget on top of the supplemental and the doubled budget that we have?
Representative Bagshaw, I appreciate the question. I appreciate the fact that you've probably had to stare at the back of my bald head for the last, 15 minutes. But
I can't, I hear you.
But I mean, this is what the legislative process is about in terms of making those decisions. And I'm not going to be here. I get term limited out. I'm not going to be here next year. Everybody around this horseshoe at some point has said school construction is a major problem, a major issue that we should confront and that we should address. This amendment does that. What that means next year in terms of the budget to the next governor and the next legislature in terms of their priorities, what they choose to pull out of the budget and say, we're not going to fund healthcare anymore. We're not going to fund this. We're not going to fund that. That's up to the next governor and the legislature to decide. And I don't disagree with Representative Lyman that there are going to have to be some hard decisions that are going to be made unless there are other revenue streams that the legislature agrees to support things like this and other things that might be in the budget. So I can't sit here right now and say that if we do this, then we should cut over here in the university. or that we should cut childcare over here, or that we should cut healthcare someplace else. But if you're here next year, that's a decision you're going to have to make. Unless, Representative Bagshaw, you would support a noticeable increase in taxes.
No, thank you on the increase.
Well, I was hoping to get you on record of supporting a tax increase, but.
No, I think this is important to be funded, but we have a spending problem. We
Right.
everything.
Right.
I think prioritize rather than strap. So
Well,
thank you.
And again, my hope by doing this was to put something on the table that was big enough to address the problem, and that, but also was realistic enough in terms of where the funding might come from.
Okay, well, yes, you've presented something big enough, but I don't know if there's a solution to it. But
All right. All right.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for answering the questions. To be clear, because I'm hearing concerns, there is currently ongoing schools who have applied for and are receiving revolving loan and renovation program funding. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That it?
Well, well, thank you.
I've been hearing a lot of concern, like
Yeah,
we need to
and-
immediately do something. Well, we are doing something,
Yeah,
but this is
and-
like the plan going forward.
Representative Mitchell, you're absolutely right. We have a revolving loan renovation fund. We have a major school construction. The accelerator is new. Those are, and then, but the discussion is simply, both of those programs are not enough at this point to meet the need.
Thank you. So we are going to change of plans. We'll take a break for caucus and look at the bills that we've heard so far. And when we come back, we do have other bills to work, but we'll hold those till after this caucus. So time-wise, you want to look at 45 minutes, 40 minutes?
No.
Let's,
Whatever you say.
Whatever you say.
whatever you say. You missed it. We'll be back in session at 3:45.
Read it off my phone. I'll make the motion. And then I'm gonna read it. I should have clean glasses for the reading. He must have left, but she'll be happy. I don't have his number.
I know he had other meetings
other
today. He wasn't
bills.
sure if he could get here, so.
Okay.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for your patience. And we had, we've got a lot we're doing. We're gonna add to that. We haven't talked about this bill, but we did have an opportunity to caucus it. And so we're gonna open the work session on LD 2204.
Mr. Chair, I resolve, I move a strike and replace with a resolve. That I will read after we have a second.
Second?
Okay. So it's just not printed yet, but everyone has had a chance to see it, but I will read it. This is for LD 2204. Resolve directing the Department of Education to develop guidance for school leaders to ensure supportive measures for young students involved in challenging, disruptive, or unsafe student behaviors. It has an emergency preamble. Whereas acts and resolves of the legislature do not become effective until 90 days after adjournment unless enacted as emergencies. And whereas young students in pre-kindergarten through grade 5 are in critical stages of social, emotional, and behavioral development. And whereas challenging, disruptive, or unsafe student behaviors may arise from developmental challenges, trauma, disability, unmet social emotional needs, or environmental stressors. And whereas schools must ensure that responses to such behavior support both the student exhibiting the behavior and the students affected by it. And whereas the school administrators and educators benefit from clear guidance regarding supportive, developmentally appropriate, and evidence-based practices. And whereas timely development of such guidance will assist school administrative units in promoting safe, inclusive, and supportive learning environments. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Department of Education shall develop and disseminate guidance for school administrative units and school leaders regarding the implementation of supportive measures for students up to 11 years of age who exhibit or are affected by challenging, disruptive, or unsafe student behaviors, including aggressive or sexualized behaviors in school settings. Section 2, resolve that the guidance developed pursuant to Section 1 must include, but is not limited to, developmentally appropriate behavioral responses for students in pre-kindergarten through grade 5, trauma-informed and restorative practices that emphasize prevention, de-escalation, and relationship building, supportive interventions designed to assist students exhibiting challenging, disruptive, or unsafe behaviors while maintaining the safety and well-being of other students and school staff, strategies to support students affected by challenging, disruptive, or unsafe behaviors, including aggressive or sexualized behaviors, ensuring classroom supports and communication with families. Guidance on collaboration with school counselors, psychologists, social workers, special education staff, and community-based behavioral health providers. Recommendations for professional development for educators and school administrators related to early childhood behavioral development and positive behavioral supports, and strategies to reduce exclusionary discipline for young students while maintaining safe and orderly learning environments. So Section 3 is stakeholder consultation. Resolved that in developing the guidance required under Section 1, the Department of Education shall consult with stakeholders, including but not limited to school administrators and educators from elementary schools, school psychologists, counselors, and social workers, experts in child development and behavioral health, parents and guardians, organizations representing educators and school personnel, including but not limited to MSSA, MSMA, and MEA, and representatives of child advocacy and mental health organizations. Section 4, dissemination and technical assistance, that the Department of Education shall make the guidance publicly available and provide technical assistance to school administrative units to support implementation of the recommended practices. Section 5, report, that no later than January 15th, 2027, the Department of Education shall submit a report to the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs summarizing the guidance developed pursuant to this resolve and any recommendations for legislation or additional resources needed to support schools in implementing supportive measures for young students. Section 6, authorization to report out legislation, that the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs may report out a bill related to the report submitted pursuant to Section 5 to the first regular session of the 133rd Legislature, with additional guidance that the information will be disseminated to school administrators before the start of the school year. So that's the resolve. That's a strike and replace for LD 2204.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Any further questions? Discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor of its passage, please raise your hand.
That was unanimous of those present. There are 10 members present and 3 are absent. 1, 2, yes. 3 are absent. I don't see Representative Crockett online anymore. So,
No, he's not. I don't see him either. Haven't seen him.
okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. And just in terms of the rest of our day, we are actually, that will conclude our work, to be honest with you overall. We have several things that we need more time to discuss. And we will do that in our own caucuses as well as much time as we can get tomorrow. We do have, we are in session tomorrow, so I would anticipate, and this is, again, we never know how long or how quickly our day is going to go. But that said, I would expect that we're back here as a committee. We'll reconvene at 1 o'clock tomorrow, and we will work through the legislation tomorrow. The only thing I know we have an extension on, we don't even know if we have that. Yeah, we don't. All right. Thank you. I will